Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Intelligent Intranet. I'm Mark Cashman, Senior Product Manager at Microsoft, soon to be joined by a fellow tech podcaster here at Microsoft. On today's episode, I chat with Stephen Rice from our OneDrive companion pod, SyncUp, and he chats with me. It's a little bit of a multiverse as we interview each other, pod to pod, Intrazone to SyncUp. We decided to get each other's takes on our respective products, he on OneDrive and me on SharePoint. We were both on site at the same conference recently, so we sat down with our travel recording kit and talked shop. Before we get into the interview of him interviewing me and me interviewing him across all things OneDrive and SharePoint, I thought I would lead in with some thoughts that I had on OneDrive in this Generation 3 era, or what we just now know of as OneDrive in Microsoft 365. And it spans, of course, consumer and commercial. It really is all the same team. That's the first bit. You, if you're a SyncUp listener, already know this from Stephen and Arvind's show. They share a lot about the commonality of OneDrive, whether you're using it for work or life, home, personal, across your enterprise, organizations at all levels, small and medium-sized businesses. There really is a core focus to make OneDrive, OneDrive, and to make the usability easy for everyone. Of course, when you think of things in the enterprise, there is always the lens of larger migration projects or at scale managing who can sync and getting that rolled out and attached to different devices with device management. There is a whole host of things that you can do with OneDrive, and real intent of how they're building things is so that you can learn it and then leverage it across wherever it is you come across working with files, period. But some of the things they're doing with Generation 3 that I think are really exciting, I've started to see them internally already rolling out in an early phase so that as we hear about it publicly and things have been disclosed, it's fun to see them start trickling in. Me, as an end user of OneDrive forever across work and life, I always love to see the benefits, and some that really impact me directly in terms of how I can get my job done, or I can manage my life assets or share them with friends and family. The big one, I think everybody's doing something with Copilot, but when you see Copilot in OneDrive to be able to summarize a document, to be able to compare multiple documents side by side, or even just to ground in a singular document a question that I want to query it. Especially if I don't know the document, I come across it, I have access to it, I can use Copilot to ask it questions in a very tiny, small language model kind of way, because I am using Copilot specifically within that document or within that library or folder. But I'm really condensing where it is that I want Copilot to get information out of, and know that it's going to come from a source that I immediately can see. Of course, I can trust it in the context of Copilot in my enterprise, but if I can scope down and ask for summaries or ask a specific question within a single document library or a OneDrive folder, that has true value for me to know exactly where I am and get things done in a real targeted fashion. So Copilot in OneDrive has a lot of potential, as Copilot does in all of Microsoft 365. But when you think of a document-centric source to be able to then derive out of, to either just get a quick answer or to reuse and repurpose, I think there's a lot of potential there. One of the other things I know that they're working on, which I use often, but certainly is just a really great tool if you enable external sharing in any fashion, is this ability to use OneDrive to get external file requests to come into your OneDrive, where you don't overshare your OneDrive, you aren't overexposing any content. You're really just collecting documents and having a really nice, easy way for people to, in the old vernacular, FTP it to you. But it's not even that. It's much more simple. It's just a link, and now they're adding this branded component so that when I do ask somebody to send me some files, I have a nice web interface for them to interact with. The file, of course, they can browse and upload it to me into my OneDrive. And I can have it be branded where I can have it look like, yep, I'm Mark at Microsoft requesting files from you. But it's just that. It's just me as an individual or as a team, in however you leverage it, having that branded external file request experience. As I shift into my SharePoint mind when I think of OneDrive, I also know that it is the same team that's powering the folder experience, whether it's a folder in Teams, whether it's a folder in OneDrive, or a document library in SharePoint, and even some of the work that they're doing to get it all the way to your desktop so that a folder within the Windows experience, not just from a syncing perspective, but from a user interface perspective, how I navigate my files, find them, share them, use them, is becoming a much more unified experience, which means you get this refreshed experience of all the visuals and all of the ways that you see previews and work with files. Much easier and more simplified navigation with the ability to filter and search down to find your content so that it's easier to get to what you're looking for. And overall, just a real huge improvements around performance of how those pages or folders or whatnot, how things load, especially the content itself. If you're leveraging a document stored in OneDrive, but you're actually accessing it maybe through Teams or on your desktop, we want that open experience to be super fast. And I guarantee you, as you feel anything get less heavy in terms of your wait time to open something, to share something, to even just grab a link, we want that to be super fast. And it's really great to see some of the work that the OneDrive team is doing, especially when you start to expand the thought of they're doing it for a better files experience for you. But it happens to be that the same team works on the lists platform. Because the list platform powers the OneDrive experience, the columns and rows and how you can filter and find, that is also now coming where you'll get some of those additional features. The benefits of lists coming to OneDrive means you will get things like board view and the different views that you get out of the box so that you can navigate and visualize your content in a much better way. Just as we would promote with lists to be able to better organize your information, this equates to being able to better organize your files, even if it's just for you and how you glance at things, but especially into those shared workspaces or even broader document centers or record centers. All files will benefit from the value of what lists can do, from a look and feel of the grid, and of course, all the different views that mean you get a lot of ways to navigate and visualize your content, your files. And the last thing I'll note here, and I know that Stephen touches on it a little bit when we chatted, was this whole new Add New button that really is this whole new way of creating inside of OneDrive. I always love some of the advice I got a long time ago. If you're going to create a new file, a document, create it with the right template in the right place before you do anything to add your first line of text, before you share it, before you route it through any review and approval. If it starts in the right location, all the better. Not that we can't move things around and adjust where you start and where you finish, especially from a compliance perspective. But now when you start, not only do you start in the right place as a best practice, but you get a much broader view of how to start a file. You can create off a template, ones that we ship out of the box or ones that you make available to all of your end users. The Add New button really launches a great new create file experience. And that is something that you should expect to see, not just in OneDrive, but in SharePoint, in Teams, and eventually anywhere where you're creating new documents, especially Office-style documents. We want you to have a great Add New experience with that little guidance of start in the right place as much as possible, knowing where it is this file needs to go, who needs to access it, and if you have a template or need a template, put it in place so that other people can leverage that quick start, getting started experience. So I just love a lot of what the OneDrive team is doing and how that translates into a better experience for wherever you manage, work with, and share your files from and to. And certainly the benefits of how you work with others is very clear a focus for them. So without any further delay, let's get on to the multiverse of interviews between Stephen Rice and myself to get our impressions and, of course, Stephen's impressions on OneDrive and SharePoint.
All right, Mark, I don't know how we've not done this so far, but I think this is the first, at least since we've revived Sync Up, like Sync Up Intrazone crossover.
I think of it as the sync zone is what we're entering into. I hope it's not going to be a sinkhole, but if we think about it too much, and I think I've heard all of your puns on Sync Up, so I'm just regurgitating some of your good stuff. But yeah, it's great to see you, and I love that we're bringing the two podcasts together, and I think we should make it more of a regular thing.
Yeah, I'm definitely on board with that. Although if you're going to bring better pun game, I don't know if I can allow that. Yeah, so we're at Microsoft 365 Community Conference. I know you've been going to a bunch of sessions. I've been going to a bunch of sessions. How's the conference been going for you? I haven't seen you because we've just been running around everywhere.
Yeah, I'd say that's the kind of the funny thing about conferences is you know where somebody's going to be, or I know what you're doing here, but that we don't see each other too often. I think we saw each other at the booth, which was fun. And you were pretty inundated by people asking questions. So that's going to be my question to you. But at the conference here, I've been racing around starting on day one, supporting Jeff in his keynote. And all you saw that Naomi was talking about, I was sort of helping her get her content ready. Off of that, then it felt like I was just racing around. I kept my head on, but I still felt like a chicken clucking everywhere. Going to all the SharePoint sessions, catching up with some of the OneDrive sessions, seeing the action in the booth. We had the Ask the Experts, the roundtables. And part of my job was just to make sure everybody had what they needed. But then when I got to put on my subject matter expert hat, all the things that we're doing around sites and pages, some of the stuff that we showed in the keynote, the demos, page design and design ideas. So it really was still, I'm wearing my SharePoint hat. And the show here was really about all the product updates, things that maybe we've talked about and disclosed, but haven't yet delivered on. So they're coming soon, and here's the latest view on them. But it was really across the whole spectrum of SharePoint, SharePoint Premium, some of the things that bleed into what Stream is up to, what Loop is up to. Dan Castanera, who's our PM from Loop, who's here, he was giving some really great Loop demos. So I was peering over his shoulder and learning a little bit about Loop.
Honestly, one of my favorite parts, I think, of doing conferences like this is you're hanging out at the booth. We've got, a Copilot station, a OneDrive and SharePoint station, an app station, all this type of stuff. And then you just get a massive people come in and they've all got a question. And some of them you can answer, some you can't, some you direct to other places. But it is an exhausting but super rewarding 2 hours. And then I went over to the lightning stage and we had these quick 20-minute talks. Mark Meraz gave a great one on Stream that I was there for. Just, why do you stream? And he had a whole thing about how your ideas are poop emojis, and you had to be there. And then just going from that into sessions. And I was like, I want to make sure I catch Sandra Grave, an amazing talk on SharePoint content governance and SharePoint Premium and all that type of stuff. And then I didn't have time to make it. So part of what I wanted to do today is I just want to I attended the OneDrive talks. You attended a bunch of the SharePoint talks. I know you mentioned pages. For the Sync Up listeners that are listening to this, we don't always get a chance to talk about SharePoint pages and all the great stuff that you do on Intrazone. What's the big news on pages? What's been going on? I had someone come talk to me about flexible pages. I was like, flexible is a cool word. I don't know what that means.
Great word. So there is a ton of flexibility that's coming to the page layout. So imagine you're in your old My Documents folder in your My Site that is now OneDrive. The site is abstracted away, I know, but a lot of people used to do some of what I'm going to describe. In a My Site, they would create their own pages. And it's kind of moving that direction for SharePoint. You can create the page and then put it where it needs to be. That's kind of the part that, is that you're a creator and we want you to create. But a lot of what we showed at the conference was from a creation experience. How can I lay out my page so that it looks beautiful? There's some really cool Copilot integration that's coming where, same as you would today, you start with a page template. Some people start with the best template, which is the blank template. Some people start with these heavily customized, already looking great, and then you add your content type templates. But now it's kind of like a Mad Lib where you go and create a template and you fill in, what am I making this page for? I might even pull in a Word document that is already something that I did, like a spec document or a customer brief or something like that. And then it'll build the page with my Word document content in the layout that the template, kind of dictates. And what you get is a super head start into what the page looks like. But then the flexibility part, which is what you heard about, is now instead of a 3-column layout, which is left to right, 3 columns, that's great. You can add a lot of content that way. But the flexibility comes in where we now kind of have hidden 12 columns, which means you can put an image and then overlay a text, a video, a photo, a Power BI web part if you want, whatever web part we have, you'll be able to lay it out kind of anywhere within those 12 columns. but to the feel of it to the end user. And what we showed is it really looks like you can put it wherever you want, like you're in a design program. And of course, with Copilot, it's like you're having your own personal web designer. So mix the two together. The goal was start faster and give you the flexibility to make them look how you want them to, based on real content so that it's easy to digest. And we take into consideration mobile views, laptop, and of course, tablet views. And so it just all flows really nicely and gives the person who's creating the page and then a great consumption experience. That was a big part of what we showed in the keynote, in the general session, and then they had a breakout too where they showed real life code, moving SharePoint around like nobody's ever seen. Part of my question I wanted to ask you was something similar. I know OneDrive pretty well because, we plan some of these things together and I know what your titles and abstracts are, but what were some of the things that maybe were the wow moments that you and the team were excited for? And of course, then kind of how were they received? How did people like them here?
There were two big things I think that we talked about that were really cool. One was we continued talking about colored folders. Carter had a session this morning about deploying the sync client, and he finally showed off colored folders inside of the File Explorer view inside of Windows. Did a really cool demo where, he flips the color in web and then it shows up in File Explorer, just a second or two later as it syncs down. Jeff talked about it briefly in his keynote. Color folders just always gets applause.
On that one, it's pretty new to see. I think you've talked about it, but to see that completeness, I think, did it get the claps that it deserves?
I think so. One of the big drum beats we've been going for over the past, 6 months or so has been this, OneDrive is where you are. This came up in the booth quite often. People are like, I love some of the improvements you made in OneDrive on the web, but my people are all in Teams. They don't go to OneDrive on the web. And it's like, that's okay. We've integrated OneDrive into Teams now. It's all there. You don't need to worry about if you want this feature, you go here. If you want this feature, go there. So having that come through was awesome. And then the other big piece. And so we had, Jeff gave a keynote speech, it was called The Age of Copilots. And my initial response was wow, that's a little cheesy, right? It just gives me Marvel Age of Ultron vibes. Exactly. And Michaela did some live demos, which is always a little bit scary when it comes to Copilot.
15 minutes of live demo using Copilot. And it was her personal sign-in that she was. It was a risky demo.
But it was fantastic. She walked through some of the basics we've talked about, hey, here's a document, please summarize it for me. Copilot's awesome at that. We've kind of shown that off quite a bit. She showed some of how it integrates across the suite. So she did and this was where the live aspect of it was really cool. Michaela reports up to Lincoln Damaris on our team, but she did hey, tell me about the top 5 action items that Lincoln have sent me over the last 2 weeks. And, Copilot spits out her actual work experiences over the last couple of weeks about what's been going on, which was really cool. But I think the one that was the big crowd pleaser, got some applause, got a bunch of questions at the booth, is she had a folder of, 4 or 5 resumes that she wanted to compare and contrast. You're hiring someone, you need to figure out just the basic information about them. And Copilot natural language, hey, can you just compare these 5 resumes in the form of a table? And Copilot spits out a table. Yep, here are the 5 candidates. Here's their, varying years of experience. Here's their different skill sets and things like that. That ability to rationalize across not just a single document, but multiple documents across the folder was really, really cool, and was probably one of the highlights of that keynote for me.
When you see something like that, and knowing that some of what you're working on, certainly in Copilot in OneDrive, do you see that and go, I know we built that, and I know we built it for that, but to see it in action, and kind of what I liked about her set of demos was they really were smart scenarios. Copilot is, of course, behind it, the documents, in the right place in OneDrive, SharePoint. But then to see her query it, not in a real complex prompt, but in a real business case or use case, and then see it in action.
And Jeff, Michaela, Naomi, and Derek, I believe from Teams, just did an amazing job throughout.
It was, from the get-go, it was pretty much designed to be a 75-minute, as much demo as possible, with Jeff, kind of peppering in a lot of the vision and strategy. But to see the amount of content that they landed, and of course, I think for you and I to see how they represent, a lot of the work that we, the collective, do, I think there's a lot that summarized and put it in the right perspective. So I think next topic I was curious about to ask you was, especially around the booth, but it might not have happened at the booth, You come here representing the OneDrive team. I'd love to know how your session went, the collaboration session. So start maybe just by sharing like what you talked about and how it went. But I also want to know, what was the strangest thing that somebody asked you, either at the booth, after your session, or randomly they said, Steven, I saw you on stage. And then they went and took a huge left turn and asked you something you did not expect.
I'll start with the session because that's easier. So we did a session with Michael Pierce, one of our designer for sharing, on collaboration across Microsoft 365, walking through all the sharing improvements we've made. I think my favorite part of it personally is I have a section I did at the end where, I talk about all the different ways you can manage sharing in Microsoft 365. And like, oh, here's like the 20 settings we have that I can talk about in OneDrive and SharePoint. And oh, by the way, there's also more in Microsoft Entra and Microsoft Purview. And let's stop talking about individual settings and let's put it into a framework you can use to like actually manage sharing in a productive way. And just having folks, take pictures of that slide, that there's something gratifying like, I made that and they understand it and they get it. As far as interesting booth interactions go, I had a fascinating conversation with a woman. I think she worked for a nonprofit, if I remember correctly. And we started off, she was interested in governance, how to govern content inside of OneDrive and SharePoint, what tools are available, and just desperate to learn. Like a sponge is maybe a better analogy, like just here to soak up as much as she could. And we talked about that for, 5 minutes or so. And then it turned into a completely different conversation about culture and growth mindset and talking through, her experiences. She came from an education background. So she talked about, helping people learn and adopt product, how to teach people to use product. And then, segueing into like, how does Microsoft do that? What does the growth mindset at Microsoft look like? And how do we approach product development? And I was not expecting to have, I think I generally had like a 20-minute conversation with her about growth mindset.
You became the attendee for a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. It's just not the type of conversation I expected to have, but it's why I'm here, is to have that type of connection with customers. And I've had a couple of people, come up and be like, I need this specific feature. Like I had someone reach out today about granular sharing settings. He's like, I have this business use case. I'm not quite sure how to set up. I'm like, let me pull up the demo computer. Here's the PowerShell that you will run in order to do this. He's like, that is what I came here for. Like this has made my trip worth it. It's super rewarding. Okay, so we've been talking for a bit. So just to kind of like bring us home a little bit, I said at the beginning, like this is the first time we've done like the sync up, intrazone crossover. I don't know about you. I feel like I've been a shill all week, like trying to like, oh, no, go listen to Sync Up. It's really funny and we have a lot of good content. What is your shill for intrazone? And for folks who are listening here for the first time and are not heard of it before?
Absolutely. So thank you for the opportunity. So the intrazone is, really focused on SharePoint. And then I put in the and related technology because there's the value of SharePoint powering a lot of different applications. So Loop, lists, now things like Whiteboard and parts of Viva, and of course our roll-in teams and, everything that's sort of Copilot-y. I'm working on an episode for Copilot. I feel like we're a little downstream from the big news of Copilot, but I think it's time, there's some real stuff coming from the SharePoint team. But it really is to put a voice to people working on the product. I often have partners on the show. How are they working with SharePoint? What do their solutions look like? And then at times we have customers on who are willing to share. It's kind of like a mini case study. So hopefully the idea of the podcast is for people to learn what's new for SharePoint, what's possible, maybe what are some things they don't know about. And it's kind of an ongoing conversation throughout the year. The biggest feedback I get if somebody approaches me and says, oh, I love the podcast, or, hey, have you thought about doing X or Y? Is they always say a nice compliment. It's really nice to tune into the intrazone because you often are very, what is the latest? And it's really easy to consume. Longer form, which I think is same for your podcast. When I hear what you all do, it not only says, oh, we've got this cool new sync feature, but let me tell you why. And the one correlation between our two is I actually had some of your colleagues on the show to do what I felt was a sync up episode, but it came through my channels to kind of ask somebody from the OneDrive, what's better, sync or add to OneDrive? And your team did a great job. And this is not a joke. I've actually sent that link to more people than I can say, because they were asking that same question. I was like, oh, there's actually a great podcast that answers the question, not just what to use when, but why. Because in the podcast, and I've heard it on your podcast, you get into the level of depth of kind of behind the scenes, not just a sneak peek, but how we built it, why we built it, and what we're doing to make it better over time. So that's, I think, the value of the Interzone.
Thanks for taking the time, Mark. I'm glad we got to finally sit down and do this. And if you haven't listened to Interzone, definitely check it out.
And if you haven't listened to Sync Up or you're listening to it right now, listen again and subscribe. All right. I hope you enjoyed that chat with Stephen and I while we were at an event together, taking advantage of two people that have some thoughts about products that we hope you love and use all the time and certainly are relevant to the Interzone and, as you heard, relevant to Sync Up. Two great shows. My bias is showing, but I really do think they are great offerings out into the world so that you know what we're thinking, you know what's current. And it's also a listening mechanism for you to send us ideas and things that you want to hear about in this medium, this podcast world. All right, let's switch gears and talk about some upcoming events. There's a great one on June 19th to the 20th. This is a virtual event. This is Intranets and AI on Microsoft 365. There's a lot to talk about with intranets, and as you start to think about building your intranet with AI in mind, be it Copilot, be it the use of smarter search or taking advantage of how you leverage AI to help you showcase content, make it fresh, make it a great experience for people that show up on your intranet pages, sites, and portals. It's a great virtual event to learn all about that and more. June 19th through the 20th, Intranets and AI on Microsoft 365. Next up is Community Days Chicago on July 20th, of course, in Chicago, Illinois. And this is one of those events, like all Community Days, where they have a ton of great content, a ton of great speakers crammed into a single day. So if you're in the Chicagoland area, make your way into Community Days Chicago. I know my peer Heather Cook is also planning to be there. So if you go, say hi to Heather, say hi to all the speakers, thank the event team, and of course, fill your brain up with a ton of Microsoft 365 and Power Platform content. On July 26th is a similar Community Days offering called M365 New York City, or M365 NYC. July 26th is going to be another day packed with great content, great speakers. My manager, Caruana Gatimu, is also going to be there. So if you're anywhere near NYC, take a train, take a bus, take a taxi, walk your way down to Community Days M365 NYC. Say hi to Caruana, say hi to all the speakers, and again, fill your brain up with all the goodness in the Big Apple. On August 12th through the 16th is TechCon 365 Washington, D.C. This is another great TechCon 365 event. There are a number of people on my team that are going to attend, to present, to support, a lot of great MVPs and community leads presenting across Microsoft 365 and Power Platform. And unique to the DC show is, of course, a focus on what government needs to hear and learn. And of course, a listening and feedback that we always encourage when you have anybody from Microsoft. If there's anything better that we can do for the product or specific to a way that you get the product, which is those government sovereign clouds, it's a great opportunity to engage with people who are a little bit more focused on the gov space, and of course, a slew of product makers and subject matter experts. On August 31st, there is a Collab Days Hamburg in Hamburg, Germany. Think of Collab Days similar as Community Days, a single day event, very regionally focused on not only native speakers, but a lot of content that's relevant and resonates with the local community, specifically in Germany with some of the high-end requirements that they have from a privacy perspective. Of course, should be of interest to all and anybody, but certainly it'll be tailored to focus on the Microsoft 365 product use and needs of those who live and breathe and work in Germany. In September 18th through the 20th in Las Vegas, Nevada, is the Microsoft Power Platform Conference. If you weren't in the EU and you didn't make the recent European Power Platform Conference, well, there's one in the United States called the Microsoft Power Platform Conference, a great depth offering across all of the Power Platform apps and services to learn all of the new ways that you can leverage Copilot in the Power Platform, how you can leverage all the new experiences and features across all Power apps. I should just have an underscore, fill in your app of preference in the Power world. There'll be sessions on it. There'll be subject matter experts to talk to. Las Vegas is going to come alive with the Power Platform, so power up and get yourself there to learn a lot more about the Power Platform. On October 18th through the 19th is Collab Days New England. This is always a pretty big Collab Days because it pulls in people and subject matter experts from across New England. So you get a lot of people. It's in Burlington, Massachusetts, and it's always a great show with a lot of great leads that put on that event. I'll be real quick on some of these last ones since they're a little bit further out, but in November 11th through the 15th is another TechCon 365 in Dallas, Texas. You can certainly register early for that if you're in the Dallas region. It's a great event like they host across the other two cities. Recently in Seattle, the one I mentioned in DC, now their third show of the year in Dallas, November 11th through the 15th. Put it on your radar. It's coming. They make a lot of noise, so you probably can't miss this one. November 18th through the 22nd is Microsoft Ignite. There's a save the date already out there. Information will be trickling in shortly around what you can expect from a content perspective, but it is a little bit longer, so expect a little bit more depth or a lot more depth in Chicago, Illinois. That's Microsoft Ignite, November 18th through the 22nd. The last specific conference that I want to call out is one that I'll be attending, and I know that I'll be supporting a lot of people from Microsoft as we prep for this one. It's a little bit down the road, but it's definitely one if you're in the European region, you should plan for this. It is the European SharePoint Conference. Now they just call it ESPC. So this is ESPC 24, December 2nd through the 5th in Stockholm, Sweden. It's going to be a great big show, as you would expect. A lot of great speakers, a lot of great sessions, workshops. We will have a Microsoft keynote, maybe 2, maybe 3. There will be a Microsoft Ask Microsoft Anything. And of course, there will just be a lot of great times to engage, as we hope you are looking forward to, because we always love getting that direct feedback, direct engagement, a way for us to learn and share at the same time. If you're looking for an event, there's always a great resource called communitydays.org. It's a website where we have a lot of people contributing all the events that are happening around the world at all points in time, whether I've covered it here or not. There is guaranteed throughout the year or at some point in the year, an event near you, a user group near you, a collab days, a community days. There's always a lot of great events that are posted on communitydays.org. And that is it for events. I want to thank our guest, Stephen Rice, for being on the show and for having me on his show for this same episode, for the same value of talking about OneDrive and SharePoint. What's current? What are we hearing? What did we hear? We encourage you to check out our show page for links to all that was discussed today and more. You can always go to aka.ms/theinterzone. Or if you have questions and feedback that you have for us or the SharePoint and OneDrive teams, you can reach us via email at theinterzone@microsoft.com or chat us up on Twitter at SharePoint, at OneDrive, at mcashman, and at cmcnulty2000. Remember to rate, review, and tell all your friends about this show and Sync Up. Follow these shows wherever you follow your other favorite tech podcasts. Make it easier so that you can listen to the next episode of The Interzone and the next episode of Sync Up. I thank you for listening. I'm your host, Mark Cashman. This has been The Interzone plus Sync Up, shows about the Microsoft 365 OneDriving SharePoint-powered intelligent intranet.